Great. My name is Lindsay Cope. I'm the Conservation Program Manager at the Santa Lucia Conservancy. Thank you all for coming this morning to talk about biodiversity-friendly fuel management.
Use the other one.
Well, that one's off, so that's a little better. Where's the clicker? All right, we have a busy day. Did everybody get a chance to fill out the pretest? Yeah? Okay. It's okay if you left things blank. There will be a post-test and it's identical. So, I'll start with the welcome and introductions, and then I will hand over the presentation to our Executive Director, Christy Fisher, and she'll talk to you a little bit about the Conservancy and the Preserve, and then we'll jump right into fire with the basics of fire behavior, and then defensible space, which is what fuel management is all about, and then we'll dig into the Preserve standards and wrap up the classroom portion with how to read the fuel management plans, which can be very tricky. They're technical documents, but we'll demystify the packet for you. And then we'll go outside and take a look around. There's some overgrown vegetation, and we'll talk about how that can be trimmed back to be less fire risk. So, as I said, my name's Lindsay. Christy Fisher is standing here on the other side of the barn. She is our Executive Director. I would like to introduce some Preserve staff that are also important for fuel management. As I say your name, if you'd stand up and just give a little wave. We got Forrest Arthur from the Community Services District. Jennifer O'Hara from Resident Services. And Jenny McAdams isn't here yet, but we hope that she'll be joining us a little bit later. She is the administrator for Design and Construction Services. And so the three of them, myself and Christy, are kind of the touchstones for fuel management. If you need a plan, if you have questions about insurance, if you need a consult on how to implement the standards, you contact one of us and we'll make sure the right person is available to help you. I also have three wonderful fire behavior experts that have helped evolve and grow our fuel management program and prepare fuel management plans for most of the built properties on the Preserve. We're still working on the last sticklers, but we'll get to 100% soon. So we've got Carol Rice right here. We've got Esther Mendano, and she does a lot of the mapping, which is a really important tool for the plans specifically. And we have Kathy Murphy. And I will let them introduce themselves. I'm going to pass the mic around, and I want all of you to introduce yourselves briefly, just your name and your agency or affiliation. But before I do that, just a little logistics. Restrooms are back here behind the screen. I know it's going to be a long classroom training, so if you are feeling restless, you're welcome to stand up, go to the back, grab some coffee or refreshments. I'm going to leave the bagels out until lunch. Lunch is about 12:30, so if you're getting antsy, just kind of keep that in mind. You'll be able to chat, make friends, and have a very healthy yummy lunch around noon. So I'm going to pass this off to Carol.
I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background as to what makes us qualified to do this work. And just real briefly, I have a fire management firm called Wildland Resource Management, and I've been doing fire management plans for about 40 years. So these fuel management standards are an evolution of those 40 years of trial and error from different plans. I have a degree in forestry and a master's in fire science. So it was really an ecology and physics mixture that brings some of those standards to you. And then I had this lovely opportunity to write a book on practical solutions for urban interface. And it was a collaboration between a landscape architect, a fire chief, and myself as a resource manager. So all of these things come together to help us build this fuel management standard for the Conservancy. So here I'm going to let Esther introduce herself.
Again, my name is Esther Mandino. I have 25 years in background in fire. Starting out with California State Parks up in the Sierra District. I got my degree at UNR. Anybody from UNR? No. And with California State Parks, I did a lot of prescriber training, so I was a certified bird boss. So I'm very familiar with getting fire on the ground. What else? I've been working with Carol for about 20 years, and oh, that's right, I do GIS as well.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Murphy. I've had over 40 years in the wildland fire business, starting out as a firefighter and working my way up. Most of my career has been with the U.S. Forest Service, and at one point I was Assistant Director in Fire and Aviation Management for Forest Service lands in California, overseeing all the operational aspects of field management, including prescribed fire. One of my favorite jobs also as Esther's has been being a burn boss and applying fire on the ground. It's a very rewarding career doing that. I also, at one point in my career, I managed the whole vegetation management program and the fire program in the Lake Tahoe Basin. It's one of the most regulated areas in the country. So that's my background. Thank you.
And now I'll have all of you introduce yourselves, just your name and where you're coming from. You don't have to get too detailed.
Good morning. I'm Dan Weiss. I work for the Community Services District here at the Preserve and ranch operations.
Chuck Thompson, same department. Yeah.
Gary Todd, good morning, same department. David Simpson, Director of Property Operations, Santa Lucia Preserve, 26 years.
Seth Parker, City Fire Management.
Andrew Johnson, Program Manager, Everslings, Las Tablas Resource Conservation District.
Michael Bliss, Landscape Architecture.
Brian Baer, Bliss Landscape Architecture.
You heard about me.
Crystal Dickman. Cheryl Healy, homeowner. Jenna Hamilton, ground studio.
Rosemary Wells, Viridian Landscape Architecture.
Emily Aikens, Cal GIS.
Brent Bates, Resource Conservation District, Monterey County, and I run the stream maintenance program along the Slings River.
Jamie Tutelli Lewis, RCD Monterey County Forest Health Coordinator.
Abby Nichols, Big Sur Land Trust.
Patrick Ripperetti, Big Sur Land Trust, Director of Stewardship.
Rachel Hendrickson, Big Sur Land Trust.
I'm Bob Lauda, homeowner here.
Rob Thompson, Wildland Manager.
Christy Whitehouse, Santa Lucia Conservancy.
David Cassars, Excavating, and Associate Capital.
Julie Mendez, I work here at the Preserve.
Frank Oil, I'm urban forester and arborist.
Justin Ono, Plant Health and Consulting.
Catherine Spitz, Landscape Architect.
Kelly Dyer, contractor. Rodrigo Sierra, Santa Lucia Conservancy.
Jenna R, Santa Lucia Conservancy.
David Beecher, Blue Moon Native Garden.
Meg Beecher, Blue Moon Native.
Paola Gatra, Rancho Tierra Grande Association and Congo Valley Association.
Kate Stickley, Arterra Landscape Architects. Gretchen Whittier, Arterra Landscape Architects.
Shana Sidhu, San Mateo, RCD, Research Conservation District.
Wow, we have a diverse crowd. And Rob and Trey Lester just arrived from Town and Country, and Jenny McAdams has joined us. She is, as I said earlier, the administrator for Design and Construction Services. Just out of curiosity, who has never been to the preserve before today? Oh, wow. Okay, just go on. Well, Christy is going to give you quite a comprehensive and quick explanation of the preserve and the conservancy. And if you have any more questions, you can find me or Rodrigo, Jenna, Dr. Christy, any conservancy staff will be happy to answer your questions. And before I hand this over to Christy Fisher, I'd like to invite Forrest Arthur to say a little bit about the CSD's role in fuel management.
Thanks, Lindsay, I appreciate that. Welcome, everyone, especially our one participant who hasn't been here before. I'm jealous. It's cool to see it for the first time, that's for sure. I want to start, I'm with the Community Service District as well. You've heard some of we've got some guys over here that are here as well. And the Community Service District is here. We are in charge of the infrastructure on the preserve, so we're taking care of roadways and water and all those fun things. We work closely with the Conservancy to collaborate on the land management component, so we're heavily involved in what you're going to learn about today. But I want to share a little story with you because I think it affects everyone in the room, whether it's a personal or business affect. It's going to affect us all as we move forward, and especially in most of the line of work that we're in. So we have 4 primary insurance carriers on the preserve right now. So we have Chubb, AIG, Nationwide, and Pure. So those are the big 4, with Chubb and AIG pretty much carrying the load. And Chubb and AIG right now are pulling back the reins in California, if you don't know already. They are taking every opportunity they can at renewal time to drop customers left and right. Excuse me. So Pure and AIG are hanging in there, Nationwide. And luckily we've had State Farm come in and start to take on some clients in the preserve. It's kind of bailed us out a little bit. But I've been trying to solicit new insurance carriers to the preserve. So I met with an inspector a couple of weeks ago, and this was Cincinnati Insurance. I don't know if you've heard with them, but they seem to be kind of seeing some opportunity in California as others are pulling out. They're starting to look at potential business in California. So I did a cold call and got an insurance inspector to come up and take a little tour with me. So we stopped at the gatehouse and started there. I showed him the map of the preserve, and he said, well, sit down for a minute because I need to tell you a few things first, which told me he was in control, which they are. Don't be kidding, there's no kidding about that. He said, don't even bother taking me to a house today that has a combustible roof. He said, if it's wood, shake, I don't care if it has Class A rating, I don't care. Don't bother about this, don't take me there. Because I won't even waste your time or mine. So don't take me to a house that has any Italian cypress trees. Deal killer, done. I said, well, fortunately, we don't have to worry about that on the preserve. We don't have any of those plants on the preserve. He said, if I go to a home with you and I see bark mulch within 30 feet of the home, done. I'm walking away. Done. I don't want to see any combustible materials within 30 feet. Some plants are okay, but they better be clear of all dead wood, and they better be evergreen. He said, I don't want to see stone, gravel, concrete, some type of patio stones. That's the only thing I want to see within 30 feet of that house. So I knew this was going to be a pretty interesting visit. So I took him up to a brand new home that's in construction. And they currently have construction insurance, but they want to move in the next month or so. And they need to switch over to a homeowner's policy and get fire insurance so they can obviously get a mortgage on the house. So I took him up to this house, and it's brand new. They've got the fuel management plan from Carroll. They not only have done the fuel management plan, they've probably spent an additional $5 or $10 grand with extra clearing. They've done a beautiful job, probably clearing close to 200 feet. Really nice. This house is on the top of Chamisol. So I took him there, and we looked at all the roadside clearing on the way up that we've been working hard with Carol's plan to clear the roadsides, and he was impressed. I told him we have underground utilities. Our power lines are underground. I told him about the preserve having put in twice the amount of water storage that was required by fire code. I told him that every house has sprinkler systems monitored 24 hours a day. I told him that we have a fire hydrant on every single lot. Very impressed, I thought. We get to the house, we walk around the house, and he said, "Oh, this is a beautiful home. Not bad on the clearing, it doesn't look too bad." We walked on a porch that was wood. He said, "Surcharge, wood porch. Can't have any wood within 30 feet. Can't have a fence, can't have a shed, can't have stacked firewood. Surcharge, surcharge, surcharge." Saw 2 dead snags within probably close to 30 feet. He said, "Surcharge." We hadn't had the arborist up there yet limbing up the trees. He saw a couple dead limbs. Surcharge, surcharge. They had put, the house is beautiful. It's all, has a nice metal roof, all stone and glass, modern home. But they had put a wood siding next to their doorway. Surcharge. So the point I'm trying to make here is, by the time I left there, I thought this was a model opportunity. I thought this was going to be one of our success stories. But this person shot it down pretty quickly, and I haven't been able to get him to call me back in 2 weeks. And he was going to go back and talk to underwriting. So I don't think that's going to work. So the point I want to make here is you're going to learn a lot about fuel management today. You're going to learn a lot about fuel management plans. And I have been fortunate enough to be taking a lot of insurance carriers around. We've been fortunate that State Farm is riding up here for the first time in 10 years. But that's not true everywhere. But these fuel management plans, when I do finally get to get an inspector up here, those usually swing the whole conversation to the positive. Because, as all of you know, these devastating fires we've had in California, most of them are caused and burn homes down by the flying embers because of the fuel length and high winds, and just the magnitude of these fires are carrying embers farther than they ever have. So these folks are looking at what is surrounding these homes that will burn that house down. And so, as we learned today, and as all of you in the business that you're in, whether you're in the architect business or landscaping business, whatever you're in, you got to understand, and this isn't just the preserve. This is all of the West, and there's a lot affecting the whole nation this way. So there's some reasons behind this today, and it's not just insurance. It's also the right thing to do. It's the right thing so that you can sleep at night, especially if you're in the urban interface. You're out living in a place like the preserve. If you live in town and surrounded by concrete, maybe you're sleeping very well. But if you're in this business line that affects this, whether it be at the preserve or somewhere else, just please understand the insurance pressures are going to be like we've never seen before, probably for the next 2 or 3 years. They'll probably adjust. They'll probably somehow, something's going to happen that'll help correct the market. But it's going to be a tough road. And we may not ever see insurance premiums in places like the preserve like we've experienced for the last 20 years. So I just want to throw that little story out there to help you understand some of the reasoning behind why you're here today. Thank you for coming. And I just hope this is valuable to you. And we certainly appreciate everything you do on the preserve. And we've got a couple homeowners here today, and it's great to have them here too, because we're going to have a problem to solve, and we're going to need your help, whether it's in the design, whether it's in after the home is in. We have some homes up here that were built 20 years ago that are all wood shake roofs, wood shake siding. I don't know what's going to happen there. I really don't, because it's going to be difficult. down the road. So again, Forest Arthur Community Service District, you're welcome to reach out to me anytime if I can help on the preserve. It's an honor to be here today and a lot of familiar faces, so enjoy. And I'll pass the baton over to Christy.
Thank you, Forrest. And for sure, we've got our work cut out for us. But as Forrest mentioned, as you drive around this place, one of the things that will really strike you and often strikes visitors when they come, and go ahead and kick it. Oh, actually, let's keep it here. Is that this community is working on fuel management as a community. And we're going to talk a little more about that. But the community, or the fuel management approach that we've taken here starts with very broad standards, works down to specifics on the ground, customized for each home. And that's a kind of an overarching approach that we think is extremely effective, and it has resulted in a much higher level of protection of this community than certainly the community I live in out in Carmel Valley Village, or most of the others in the state. So when we talk about who we are as a community, the Santa Lucia Preserve is a planned community. I think most of you know that there are about 300 residential properties woven into a 20,000-acre preserved landscape here at the preserve. It's absolutely spectacular. If you haven't gotten out to the hinterlands of the preserve, it's a treat to do so. And I'm sure even with the fog, a lot of you saw some cool stuff coming in this morning. But it is truly a community in the sense that we have landowners and members. We have our community services district led by Forrest. We have our resident services team, many of whom are here today, who help landowners with the implementation of field management and many other things in terms of arranging for that. The Santa Lucia Conservancy is a nonprofit organization that owns about 10,000 acres of the 20,000 acre protected here, and also works with landowners on the protected portions of each lot. Every individual property here has about 90% of it protected through a conservation easement. Those are the overlands, and we'll be talking more about that in a few minutes. I also want to say that all of you are a member of this community as well. Valued members in the sense that you help create and maintain this amazing community that's woven into this exquisite natural landscape. And so we're very excited to have you all here and to be able to share this information with you. We also recognize that there's a tremendous amount of expertise in the room. We welcome your tough questions. We welcome your skepticism. We welcome your, hey, but that doesn't sound consistent with what somebody said 20 minutes ago or with what the fire chief told me a week ago. Please bring that. There's going to be lots of opportunity for questions and comments. Every one of us is in this room to learn, and I think that's especially us here to hang on to this microphone today. I think also it's important to note that we all want the same thing. One of the things that makes us a community is a shared vision of the protection of homes and people in particular throughout the preserve and beyond the gates. Healthy ecosystems and the scenic natural beauty that makes this place so special. And a resilient fire-safe landscape that's woven into not just our 20,000 acres, but the whole Monterey Peninsula. I don't know who's got the clicker, it looks like you do. So we've already gone around a little bit, but for our training today, I just wanted to note that we've got natural resource consultants, landscape architects, landscape and building contractors, landowners and managers, and then the local agencies and associations. So and they're very evenly distributed, relatively speaking. So super excited to see this, and excited to see in particular the landowners and managers and the agencies, many of whom also maintain land, here as kind of practitioners. So again, kind of a glimpse for those of you who might not have seen the place before. This is just some of the scenic beauty and ecological diversity that we're trying to protect. And you see it as you drive through. You may see the deer. This morning was a turkey morning, I noticed. You guys all saw about 1 million turkeys. But some of the biodiversity we're trying to protect is more common. You can see our little coyote dancing along in front of the home there. But some of it is, we think about less perhaps, our native pollinators, or in this case, honeybees up in the tree. We are thinking about native biodiversity in the plants, the insects, as well as the wildlife that we all treasure. So we do take that community-wide fuel approach, and so I want to take a moment to kind of explain how this works. So we have, thanks to Carol Rice and her team, dating all the way back to 2005, here on the preserve, we have had preserve-wide fuel management standards. So this community has kind of been on the leading edge of this conversation for a long time. The next step down are these lot-specific fuel management plans. So the preserve-wide plans, or the standards, sorry, the preserve-wide standards can set broad standards for the preserve. But we understand that every lot out here, and the lot sizes here might range from an acre to, I think the largest one is about 400 acres in size. And so those, some of those lots include archaeological sites, extremely fragile and rare wildlife habitat, endangered species. There's some really cool stuff out on these privately held lands. And so the lot-specific fuel management plans look not only at that diversity and how we might be able to conserve it, but also on other unique attributes that are of particular interest to our fuel management experts: topography, wind direction, proximate ember sources, all the kinds of things that they're going to talk a little bit more about. That's all brought together in these lot-specific plans. And every residential property on the preserve either has one now or will, typically by the time the home is built. There's also roadside fuel management, as Forrest mentioned. And then out in the wildlands, which I'll explain for a minute, but that broader protected landscape, the Conservancy does quite a bit of weed management, and we also have a conservation grazing program. I don't think we'll see any of those critters today, but we have a herd of about 100 cattle that are managed to move across most of our, over the, through a rotation that takes a couple of years. We have about 5,000 acres of grasslands. We're working to use those cattle to manage fuels and support biodiversity in those grasslands by marching them around. And so once in a while when you're out here, you may see a herd of cows. You might even be lucky enough to see us moving them by foot with the help of just a small dog, a very capable small dog named Roo. So when we're, just to talk a little bit about nomenclature here, when we talk about the homelands, a lot of what we'll talk today about is homelands and openlands. And the homelands, as you can see over here, is the residential building envelope. I hope you can see a dotted red line there. We made it on this graphic, we made this very faint dotted red line because it's actually not easy usually to find or to see the homeland boundary. But within that area is the building envelope. That's where landscaping, home construction, kind of that built environment for people to enjoy, all happens in the homeland. There's also a good bit of fuel management and fuel management planning, in which these guys are going to talk about design considerations of the home and the outbuildings that happens in that homeland. I'm going to step away from the speaker. And within the homeland, mowing and management may be guided by the fuel management plan, but it's not really particularly restricted. The homeland is considered that human-built environment. And as Forrest said, as non-combustible zones are starting to shift, whether it's in regulation or through the insurance lens, if you need to go non-combustible throughout your entire homeland, that would be from the Conservancy's perspective, with the exception of some trees that are protected for various good reasons and which can be retained if they're managed correctly. There's a lot of flexibility in the homeland as to what can be done to meet those needs. But all of those treatments should be consistent with the preserve-wide fuel management standards, and that's in large part to keep the entire community safe. We're focused on protecting that home. We're also thinking about how to keep the whole community safe. Landscape design, I should go back for a sec. Landscape design and maintenance is key, so I'm delighted to have so many landscape architects and contractors here. There are additional resources that Jenny McAdams and other members of the Design Construction Services and Resident Services can help connect you with. The design guidelines and the construction guidelines provide quite a bit of guidance on some of these elements. And then there's, of course, always a lot-specific fuel management plan. So you've got tremendous resources. They're designed to work together seamlessly. And you have a team here of essentially free consulting resources at the Conservancy and others to support you in that. So please take advantage of us. You're absolutely here to help. So the open lands are the areas of the individually owned residential lots that are protected by a conservation easement. That conservation easement means that the landowner voluntarily placed, but thereafter perpetually will honor, permanently honor restrictions on what can happen to those lands. And collectively, those open lands, each one might range anywhere from a couple of acres to close to the full 400 acres of the largest lot. they collectively add up to 8,000 acres of conserved lands. So when we talk about how proud we are that the preserve is 90% protected, about 40% of that 90% is protected through these open lands. So they are extremely valuable to us from an ecological perspective. They also have archaeological sites. They have all kinds of really cool stuff out there, historical, cultural sites. And so as Carol and her team or others begin the preparation of that lot-specific fuel management plan, they come to us, we share where are the wetlands, where are the endangered species habitat, where are the ARC sites, and they work that right into the plan. Wildlands are the lands outside the open lands, and you'll just see them as, looks like parkland or the hills and the forests that are beyond the gate. They are actually very closely interwoven into the whole community as well. The wildlands are closer than you may think in many cases. They're immediately adjacent to the lots, to the residential lots. And the Conservancy owns and manages those lands for their biodiversity values and watershed values. The Conservancy actively manages weeds and habitat health in those priority areas within the wildlands. And we work with the landowners, but typically no residential fuel management happens in the wildlands unless it's required by the individual plan. And implementation of fuel management is conducted or coordinated with the Conservancy. So I'm just curious, to keep you guys in the conversation, how many of you have felt in the past or may feel today that doing fuel management in open lands, these protected areas, or even the wildlands, is difficult or impossible? Is that a sense that you had?
Before, yes. It's just changed recently, it seems like, just because of all the fires.
So you feel like that's changed recently?
Correct, yes.
That in the past it was hard?
Before, when you'd asked to take or clean any of the fuel from open lands, it was, if I did it with a way that had the customer looking for cleanup,
right,
unless we used the words fuel management, it wasn't taken seriously.
Got it. So that's a great reflection of the balance that we're trying to strike. That the Conservancy is responsible for managing those natural resources in a way that protects and supports their natural values. And we need to also be responsive to and available for the purpose of fuel management subject to the plans. And so while we have always allowed fuel management in the open lands, I think you're absolutely right that we're now doing a much better job of communicating how and when that work can happen. And the fuel management plans, as they're becoming now more universal, because in the past some lots had them, some lots didn't have them yet. As we're coming up to a point where virtually all the homes now have them, I think there's much better clarity. But I do hope that there's, in the myth-busting department, if there was a sense walking in that the Conservancy does not allow fuel management in open lands or even wildlands when necessary, that's no longer, walk away knowing that that is not the case. So that said, I will mention that, and Forrest did a great job, I'll circle back to that. But I think where we're going to find some tension on that is when the insurance companies are trying to ask for more and more and more. So we'll get back to that conversation. So when we talk about biodiversity sensitive fuel management goals, just very quickly, fire safety comes first, right? We're promoting fire safety, we're reducing ignition risk, and we're doing that while maintaining those natural and aesthetic values. We're minimizing impacts to watershed functions and sensitive resources, but minimizing does not mean entire avoidance. Sometimes we have to take some, have some effect on a habitat that, so we just assume not have, but it's necessary for the protection of the community. Our goal is to reduce predicted flame lengths to less than 2 feet within 30 feet of the structures at a minimum. That might be changing. These ladies are going to update us on how things are going, but that's been an explicit goal of our standards for some time. And we are looking to create fire resilience for both the human and the natural communities. And one thing for us all to remember is by protecting people from fire coming from the wildlands, in many cases we're also protecting the wildlands from fire coming from the people. A lot of these ignition sources are at the homes or very close to them. And the mowing that we do for fuel management is one of the greatest risks of ignition that we've got. And so balancing, those are some of the balances that we're also trying to that biodiversity sensitive fuel management outcomes that we'll talk a little more about Reducing fuel volume and continuity, we talk about going from the home out. People say, yeah, I'm working on my home, but what are you doing out there in the wildlands? Well, way out there in the wildlands is not where we need to make our fuel management investments. It's near the home that it really counts. So we want to retain healthy natural vegetation. We'll talk about that a lot, the native particularly. Avoid erosion and slope destabilization. We have other considerations. We don't want to start destabilizing some of the slopes proximate to these homes and the road system. We want to preserve trees and shrubs for habitat and privacy screening. When you drive around, the place looks as amazing as it does. A lot of that was intentionally designed screening that was installed or promoted around the homes. And we don't want to unwind that unnecessarily. We want to protect groundwater quality, of course, our fish and our streams, maximize, and we want to ultimately maximize the effective treatments and minimize unnecessary vegetation use. So when Carol and her team or other contractors prepare these fuel management plans, they're thinking about all of these goals, with, again, the highest priority being public safety. All right, so you've made it through the initial element, and this is going to be the first of several opportunities to ask questions, and again, just push back. You know, we love to hear, well, you might be saying that now, but that's not what I've experienced. Help us understand that. Above and beyond all else, what we are recognizing, and Forrest really put a very fine point on it today, this is an area that we've been interested in and paying attention to for a long time. But that level of interest and concern and engagement is going much higher in the wake of these fires. And so we're here to help. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Let's kind of build those easy stuff to start us out with, right? Is everybody hearing us all okay? All right. And everybody feels like they get the homeland, open land, wildlands piece, because if you don't get that now, it's going to be hard to follow as we go. Sweet.
Say something.
Yes.
If you're having some customers that have issues with closeness of brush or trees or anything like that, it's not like you really want to be somebody fingering somebody else to say they need to take care of that. But at the same time, you want to get it taken care of. How would you suggest opening up that line of talking to the customer?
So if I understood you correctly, and correct me if I didn't, if you're seeing some fuel management needs to happen, but the fuel management's, the customer's not asking for it, or is specifically...
Or wanting it.
Right. So this is also something that we see quite a bit. That, you know, I'll roll the dice, I'll take my chances. I love that vegetation right there so much. So one of the things that Carol and her team are gifted at, and there are other contractors who can do this as well, we'll talk about qualifications in the future, or later in the conversation, we have always found a way to protect the features that they love while managing them to meet the fuel management standards. And you guys can tell me that maybe once in a while there's not a way to do it, but ultimately there almost always is. And I'll give you an example. Sorry to rattle the mic. An example is the kneeling trees. So this comes up to us a lot. And a kneeling tree is a big oak that has one of those big branches that lays right down on the ground. And often it'll come down, dip onto the ground, and then lean back up. They can look almost artistic, sculptural. Some people have bought the lot because they love that look. And then their landscape contractor or somebody who's just looking at the state guidelines will say, that's got to go, right? That branch is a fuel, it's a ladder fuel to bring fire into the canopy. We can't have that. It's got to go. And we'll get the call, help me save my tree, right? I don't want to lose that feature. And not to steal any thunder, but we can actually, by removing any dead material out of that, and then managing the land or the ground around it for basically a non-combustible zone around that feature, you can typically preserve that feature. And so that's part of the power of these custom fuel management things. Carol and her team will ask the landowner, what do you care about? What would you like to retain? I'm going to hand her the mic because she's a company. And she can answer for herself.
Well, we do focus on how to make that balance. But actually what I was going to add, Christy, was that we're doing now a few, well actually not just few, updates. In other words, we go back and see after the initial fuel management plan, 5 or more years later, how is that turning out? And sometimes we find that the homeowners have not implemented the plan the way we want it. I think that's what maybe your question is.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so,
Less
we do
of
see
the
that.
structural types of things they like, but I mean, things that are definitely hazards that they don't want to take care of.
Yeah, and sometimes it's simply a matter of not implementing the plan. And so we do point that out to the homeowner and.
But
and so they
ultimately,
know.
it's their decision on what they want to do.
This is an important part, and Forrest will have a comment here too. I think I might just walk over to him, because this is where the teamwork comes in.
So, as everybody may or may not know, we're incorporated in with the Monterey County Regional Fire District. We have a firefighter paramedic up here every day. In the greater area, whether you, let's say you're in Carmel Valley, the fire district goes out once a year on an annual basis, and they do what they call LE 100s. So if you live in the valley, you know what I'm talking about, because you get a little door hanger that says you passed or you failed. So they're looking at the 100 feet of defensible space. And so that's done out in the greater area. We haven't done that on the preserve. Last year we did a voluntary LE 100, but we're going to step up that inspection, and I think it's going to tackle what you're talking about, because not only fuel management plan is going to help, and then you have insurance requirements, but there are fire district requirements with the defensible space. It's a CAL FIRE 100 feet clearance, and so we're going to start those inspections. And they're going to be neighborly, and we don't want people calling in their neighbors, and that's the last thing we want to have happen. But if you are in a situation like you're talking about and it's uncomfortable or there's something, you can always reach out to me. We have a new fire marshal named Kevin Cameron, great guy. He's fantastic. He's been to a lot of properties with me, with homeowners, and we can help through that process, very much so. And it's really nice to, instead of putting the Conservancy in an awkward position, or the community service district, or your business, it's real nice to let the fire district help with that. So we have great assistance there with the fire district. So if you run into those situations, you absolutely can reach out to me and I'll help.
Okay, we got a question back. Thanks, and just to say, you can also reach out to the Conservancy. And we find that often when things aren't implemented, it's because there's one thing they're trying to protect, and they're afraid if they bring the crews in, they'll lose that one thing. So somebody's asking why, what's going on.
What it is.
And what it is. Yes, sir.
Well, what about the county concerns, like a landmark overhang your house and not being able to take it out?
Right, so like a branch of a landmark tree, is that what you're thinking of? Trees very close to the house. Right. So the fuel management plan will address those. And Carol may want to respond to this, but what we're seeing is they're very specific for sure. You can remove trees or mark major branches that are too close to the chimneys, or that are in other ways, certainly if it's a hazard tree that has a lot of dead material in it. If it's a healthy tree and it can be maintained, managed, we like to do that, or retained. Sometimes individual branches need to go, and I'll let Carol answer specifically. It's a very good question. We see this a lot.
See if I can work. You want to check what I'm doing?
That was. Hang on, I need to turn this one off.
Okay. Does this one work? It is connected.
Okay. Let's kill that one.
We have a specific driveway zone, and we'll be hearing more about that. If your question was about branches that may be overhanging so that a fire engine can't get through, is that your question?
Over the house.
Over the house. The larger branches are, Esther's actually going to talk about fire breaking next. We're not worried about big pieces, we're really worried about little pieces. And those little pieces may include the leaf litter on the roof, which is an issue, but the big branches are not so much an issue. Chimney, there is a code requirement for 10 feet from the chimney, and of course, everybody has to comply with the code.
So what you're saying is a large limb that's extending over the canopy of the roof, but not within that zone around the chimney, should be permissible if it's a significant diameter and doesn't have dead wood on it.
Yes, and sometimes it's a mechanical issue. Do you want to have that branch so close that it might rub against the roof, or you want to have it sway in the wind. But from a fire point of view, again, we're worried about little pieces instead of big pieces.
Yeah, so I guess the question, this has occurred to us before. We've had people try to use the insurance gambit about limbs over the roof to have a tree removed. And we had meetings, and I guess the end result was that trim the trees. You don't necessarily have to take the tree out because it's hanging over the roof. But I guess the other question was, in the design phase, I suppose, during the design phase, you have to situate the house further away from the landmark oak, right? I mean, that's part of the puzzle, to be able to tree plant for that. And sometimes you get additions, and the situation came up with an addition was near an oak tree, we were able to do it, but then eventually we had to take the oak out because sometimes these designs just kind of grow.
And, I'll let Christy talk about the design phase, but one of we updated the fuel management standards, and one of those updates is actually in consideration of the fuel management standards earlier in the design process, so that those things can be considered earlier on.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, and I see one more question here, but we will be talking more about the design phase, and you're absolutely right. That's what has to happen. We need to be thinking about this right up front. Yes?
I'm just curious to understand, in a situation where a property has homeland, overland, wildland, and a lot-specific plan that's being executed, in terms of implementation and ongoing management, where's the homeowner's responsibility for carrying that out, and then the conservancy's? How do they overlap?
That's a terrific question. So for those who may not have heard it, where there's a property that's very proximate to home, you've got your homeland and your openlands, and then wildlands very close by, and the fuel management plan may involve all of those. Whose responsibility is it for implementation? And implicit in that is who pays for it, right? That's a question that comes up a lot. Did I get that correct? Okay. So the fuel management throughout the state of California, fuel management for a home is the homeowner's responsibility. And that's the case here on the preserve as well. So the landowner is responsible for getting the fuel management plan and implementing it. But the Conservancy is a partner in all of that work. And as I mentioned, we provide essentially free consultation. We're available to help both the design and the implementation phase. And when wildland is involved, which is rare, but it does happen, sometimes the Conservancy chooses to do that work ourselves. Or we may request that we be present while the work is done. But one of the real powerful things about the fuel management plans, and a slight myth busting that I want to do for Forrest here, is the fuel management plans are designed to make sure that your landowners are paying for and maintaining over the very long term only the fuel management that's actually going to protect the house. And one of the biggest concerns we have about what the insurance companies are doing right now and driving it further and further and broader and harder is, in many cases, what we have seen is that initial pulse to get the insurance coverage, to get through through that gamut. You might push the fuel management way out beyond what the fuel management would recommend or allow. And that will not ever be maintained again, right? Or maybe once every 5 or 10 years when your insurance, requires it. But what happens in the meantime is not infrequently you will disturb what was a very stable, relatively fire-safe or fire-resilient natural community, and what comes back is French broom, which is a heck of a fire wick. So you've actually just damaged aesthetically, ecologically, and fire hazard-wise. You've just created a much greater footprint that you're going to have to manage forever, and there's a big cost associated with that. If that happened in the wildlands, all of a sudden the Conservancy is now, because if the landowner doesn't, we must, or it'll spread out into the rest of our native habitat. So it creates a liability and cost for the Conservancy. So implementing these fuel management, these lot-specific fuel management plans aggressively and appropriately, but consistent with that plan and going no farther than that plan is very important. If your client gets a call, if your homeowner gets a call and says, my insurance company says it needs to go an extra 100 feet, call whoever wrote the plan or us and say, hang on, can we talk to the insurance carrier about this? Can we push back a little bit? And in fact, you often can. If you can't, if they say, no, we're not going to write this policy, you don't do it, then let's figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't drive a bad outcome for the owner and for the landscape. Does that help? And then it's another question here, and then we should probably jump. Rosemary, did you have?
Yeah, I think you answered it in your reply.
Great. Yes, ma'am.
So you talk a lot about open lands and homelands, but how do I know where that boundary line is?
Wonderful question. So Lindsay is making sure I don't forget to mention how to find that boundary. And I mentioned that sometimes it's not easy. In the homes that are not built or were recently built, in each of the corners of the homeland, you may see a white PVC pole that is typically, depending on how deeply buried it's gotten, 5 to 6 feet tall. And those corners are pretty easy to find in those early days. But over time, the landowners have a tendency, they're unlovely, let's just say, and they do have a tendency to disappear, not unreasonably so. At that corner, there is still a survey marker with a piece of rebar, but they can be very hard to find. That's where the Conservancy, free consult comes in. Lindsay Cope can find those corners. She's very good at it. But we've actually got a new protocol now that I hope you'll share broadly with the owners and with the contractors, which is for homes that are, Lindsay has designed and we have made now a set of homeland boundary markers that are metal and they're very small and aesthetically pleasing. They have our Poppy logo on it. And we will come out, and if the house is already built, the Conservancy will find and install the corner markers with like little split timber posts and permanently mark them with that plaque. So in the future, it's not going to be as hard. On new homes that are being built, we're asking the owners to do that as a part of the design process. And that's something we've worked together with the resident services and the homeowners association here on the design and the implementation of that. So it's going to become easier to find. But one thing that's fascinating about the way they set these things up, some of these homelands have 10 corners. They can be very intricately designed. That's actually a little bit of a warning. If you see a homeland that's got a really weird shape to it, the odds are pretty good there's an archaeological site or something super sensitive in proximity that they were working around. So in particular, if you have a complicated homeland, please bring us in earlier rather than later. That's not always the case, but it's often the case. And I better hand this off or I'll just keep talking all day if you guys don't want that. Oh, was there another question? Sorry, Cheryl. Yes.
I'm someone that purchased a home that had already been built. And can you just touch on how we can all be better informed and better stewards about how to implement these plans and follow through in the event that someone purchases an existing home here in the preserve rather than building it through ECIA or through DRB?
Thank you, Cheryl. So for anybody who may not have been able to hear that, Cheryl has purchased a home here. She lives here on the preserve that was already built. And a great deal of our education process for landowners happens through the design review process. That's a thoughtful process that involves all the architect, the landscape architect, the owners, their whole team, and there's a lot of this kind of communication happens through that process. So if you come in after that process buying a built home, in the past in particular, there's been relatively few opportunities to become educated and informed on this. And I would imagine a lot of the contractors who come to work on the preserve for the first time, or maybe come to work in the CSD, would have a similar issue. So this training and the materials that Lindsay has created as a part of this training are part of how we're trying to address that, Cheryl. We're actually creating a landowner's handbook that will have a lot of this information in, so every time there's a change of ownership, whether it's a lot or a built home, we'll be handing out a handbook, and all of that material will be on our website. So we are really trying to raise the bar in terms of access to information so that landowners like you can follow through, because I know you want to. And I will say that your lot is beautiful and a wonderful job. So thank you for that question, because you've reached out to us and worked with us closely, and we really appreciate that.
Well, and I worked on it a lot. I mean, I had the trees. It took 3 weeks of trimming back some of the oaks and doing it in a proper way so that it didn't create a fire hazard or damage the trees. I was pretty naive about it, but I know you all came, the Conservancy came out several times and Carol, you came, but it really helps to have the resource and also the conversation, because as someone that comes here to the preserve, it's pretty overwhelming, and it's pretty hard sometimes to find the right subcontractors that aren't going to give you the wrong information or do the wrong thing. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's been trial and error, I have to say, so.
Well, thank you for that, Cheryl.
Today.
Yeah, you bet. And one of the things that we're also looking at is having a kind of the gold standard contractor list, or kind of the 18 contractor list that the Conservancy can refer. And one of the things as we think about that is who among our contractors are willing to come to a training like this. And it may be that if the contractors come to a training like this, that we can put a short list of here are the highly trained contractors that we can really confidently recommend for fuel management and have that on our website or make it available through resident services. So yes, thank you. And we're mindful of that, we're working on it. Keep our feet to the fire, don't let us slack off. Yes, sir, one more question.
So for the existing, like a homeowner like Vern, that service to come out and put the homeland post that you were talking about,
Right.
is that a paid or a free service for the homeowner?
So if the home is already built, the Conservancy will cover the cost.
Okay.
Yeah, if the landowner wants to share the cost with us, that would be lovely, but it's not required. It's our belief that effectively marking these homeland corners is going to be the most effective way that we can support the great outcomes that we're all seeking here. And so that's something we'll cover the cost on. Shall I jump to next? Is it Esther coming up? Thanks, everybody.
We're going to switch gears. Can you guys hear me okay? I hold it. Closer.
There you go.
Good. Not that close to the speaker. So we're going to totally switch gears. We're just going to talk about fire behavior right now. And I'm going to go through it fairly quickly because we're probably pressed for time. A little bit, okay. So what is it, exactly what is fire behavior, or what do we mean by when we say fire behavior? What should we be concerned about in regard to fire behavior, and how we model it? And the modeling part of it, probably won't say much. You don't away from it. There we go. So, speak up. So, I don't know if you're hearing the feedback, but I'm getting feedback here. But so, when we talk about fire, we understand fire in terms of these fire triangles. How many people have seen these triangles? Wow. Okay, a couple people.
We can't hear you back there.
At all? Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold it closer. So when we talk about fire, or how we understand fire is through these fire triangles. So how does a fire start? It needs oxygen, it has to have a fuel, it has to have a heat source, some sort of spark to get it going, right? And this is what happens like in seconds. This is what happens on the micro side, I suppose. And then in terms of what happens in the day, how does what affects fire behavior? That's going to be, again, the fuel, weather, and topography. And then on a broader scale, we're looking at climate, vegetation, and those sources of ignitions. So today we're just going to concentrate on this middle part, which is the fuels, weather, and topography. Not in that order. So real quick, what's the role of weather in fire? We all should probably have a general sense of this, right? Some of the major components are temperature, relative humidity, wind, and what these all most affect is fuel moisture, because that's what is the big driving force of a fire. If it's too wet, it's not going to burn, right? We won't go into that. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about this. So, here in Northern California, similar to Southern California, we have, our prevailing winds from the southwest for the most part. This is just our, the general daily wind patterns, and by the mid-morning, afternoon, you're getting this kind of general wind flow. But of course, it changes by topography, but the general wind flows from the southwest. And then some of these large fires that occurred in Northern California have happened during these. I don't want to say they're special because it happens all the time. We're just not aware of it because the fire doesn't start. But often, occasionally, these conditions occur where that general wind pattern is reversed. And what's mostly important about that is that it's a really dry air mass that comes through really intensive winds, and those are the fires from the northwest, and those are the kind of weather conditions that are conducive to large fire growth. Fires don't always happen when those conditions occur, but when it does, then you get things like the Tufts fire or the Sobranos fire. I'm not too sure exactly what Sobranos was, probably a little bit different. So what's the role of topography? So the part of that we could talk about in the fire triangle here is the topography part, is that it changes that the general air mass flow, the air masses that are flowing through your region, whether it's from the southwest or from the north, your topography is going to change that. We've all felt it. We all know that in the afternoon the wind shifts. It's coming down slope, or we're going up canyon. We all kind of know, and that changes at every home site. You've been at your house and have felt that shift in the wind, or you're on top of the ridge, and you felt that swirling. That's going to all of those things are going to influence fire behavior, particularly slope aspect and exposure to that winds, which of course changes fuel moisture, which is very important. And when we get further on and to talk about the things that we can control, the fuels, that's a big, the biggest thing that you're going to do. You're not necessarily going to be conscious of it, but all of the fuel management treatments, that's what we're controlling, is the fuel moisture. We're trying to control, we're trying to change that fuel moisture regime. So, what is fuel? What do we mean when we say fuel load?
Anything you can bring.
Anything. Everything that's out there is fuel. The trees, the shrubs, the grass, your house is the driest thing on the landscape. It's the driest thing out there. So that's all fuel. So unless it's made of stone, of course. So whether the important characteristics of that fuel, it's the volume of it, how much you have, the horizontal and vertical arrangement. Carol's going to talk a lot about that, and so is Kathy. And of course the fuel moisture. Again, everything is driven by fuel moisture. You're not going to have a fire if it's too wet. And the chemical contents of fuel. The only reason why I put this in here is because what we do in the site-specific fuel management plans, we do have a portion where we talk about the fuel modeling or fire modeling, because we did do some for the preserve and for the specific homes. And I just wanted to put the caveat that it's just a model, it's not reality, and that it's when we do the site visits, it's going to change. It may change what we think. We get certain outputs. It's going to help us understand what's going to happen on the lot, but it's really, Carol will look at what I put out and she's, that's wrong. Or, our experience is going to possibly change what those results are. But it is important to do, and it does highlight a lot of areas that may be of concern. So some of the key points is that flame embers can be produced from vegetations and or structures, but structures are not modeled. That's right, I wanted to change that and say that, is that we're not modeling fire, the homes burning or anything like that. It's just all about the vegetation around it. And we have very little control over the weather or terrain, but we do have control over the fuels.
add, I saw someone take a picture of the slide, and I believe that these will be available to the folks here. So if you'll be able to get the presentation, just be pointed information. Questions?
Yeah. I know that was really fun.
So we may want to go back one slide with one more. There you go. So this is actually a fire growth model. What in the field management plans we actually provide is a map of the flame lengths over the lot, and this is something that we don't do in the field management plans, but it does show how fire will grow over time, and it uses the same data. So it's so I think this is why Esther put it in. But we we have those flame length maps, and as Esther said, when we go on the site, we see, you know, the data inside may not have been as accurate as what we are seeing here, and we will provide a more specific analysis of that using expert opinion. But there you go. More questions about fire behavior?
Can you talk a little bit about horizontal versus vertical? We're gonna go through that.
Yeah, we'll go through that.
Ad nauseum.
Yeah, that was the word I was going to use, ad nauseum. So other questions? Yes?
I have a question. So when you're looking at a regional fire growth map versus a more specific one like the preserve, what type of data sets are you using, and are they publicly available?
Yes, yeah. So that's a good question.
Esther, can you repeat the question for people?
Oh, sure. So the question was, what data are we using to do the modeling that we did for the preserve and for other places? For this particular, for that fire growth picture, as well as the flame length output that we use in the fuel management plans, we just use Landfire. So Landfire it's a national program. They provide all of the fire behavior modeling software, either FlamMap, Farsight, or there's a bunch of them. Those are the ones that I use. And they use the basic 8 layers. It's called the landscape file, and it's a field model type, canopy cover, stand height, canopy base height, canopy bulk density, and then the terrain, elevation, slope, and aspect. And you just get it. It's designed for the fire professionals to be able to use anywhere in the United States and quickly download that data and use it. And so you can use it too. The problem is, like I was saying, is particularly in places where there's a lot of public land or private land, it's not particularly accurate. Where there's a lot of public land, where the Forest Service is, or any agency that collects a lot of vegetation data. That's where my initial career was collecting vegetation data. And we would feed that into the national program. And so in those places, the data sets are a lot more accurate. And in places where there's a lot of private land, it's not. And so you might just say, well, it's not really that. I don't personally think that, because I've been to the site, I don't think that fuel model is correct. And the fuel models I could talk for a week about the fuel models. Those are just representations of what we think the vegetation, how it will burn. And what goes into fuel models are fuel loading, the heat content of the actual fuel, so grasses will be different than, I'm probably going too much. Sorry. It is publicly available. It's called Landfire. Just look it up. Landfire.gov, I think.
Thanks, Esther. It is a complex science, this fire behavior modeling. And that's why the expert opinion and the specific fuel management plans for specific properties are important. Because Landfire is, based on a lot of things, some satellite imagery and data when we have it, but the lot specific. We need to get right down to that specific property. And now we're going to talk about defensible space, and after this section, we're going to have a break. Just so you know. So, Defensible space, it's required by California state law. State law used to be 30 feet up until about 15 years ago. They decided that wasn't enough. Now it's 100 feet, and this is the minimum. This is the minimum requirement by the state. They have to come up with something that's statewide. So in some places, you're going to get by and 100 feet will be okay, in some places not. That's why we have specific standards for the Conservancy. So the law, Public Resource Code 4291, it requires homeowners to clear flammable brush, dead and dying material, other vegetation around their buildings, all buildings, not just your home, to 100 feet or to the property line. You can't, the law does not allow you to go onto your neighbor's property. We actually get that question in a lot of communities when their neighbors aren't doing their defensible space. Requires you to maintain a tree, shrub, or other plant adjacent to or overhanging a building free of dead or dying wood. And remove that portion of a tree that extends within 10 feet of the outlet of a chimney or stovepipe. So here on this example, the 10 feet no limbs within 10 feet of a chimney. Maintain the roof free of leaves, needles, or other vegetative materials. Look how clean that roof is, right? Not a leaf, not a needle. Going on with the law, the amount of fuel modification necessary, it's going to take into account the flammability of the structure. You know, looking at the building material, the standards, the location, the type of vegetation, and a greater distance might be required, as is here in the Conservancy. What are the benefits of defensible space? Provides a buffer between your home and an oncoming wildfire, and it gives firefighters a better chance to save their home. Gives them a safety zone. Protect your home. Here in the Conservancy, we use fuel management standards and plans to manage the land at a larger scale. We're looking at the entire area. We are looking at individuals' homes and how all those fit into the whole picture. So we're doing both. We're, at the micro scale and the landscape scale. So the preserve-wide fuel management standards, they meet state law, and they are done in a way that it's compatible with biodiversity. And we heard a lot of that this morning from Christy, and that's important because we can do both. In my career in the Forest Service and all these landscape level areas that we manage for fuels, we always did it with all those same considerations, with wildlife, with archaeology, hydrology, soils, all of those things to be able to, have something that's, fire-wise, I suppose, and also biodiversity. All those things are important. The fuel management standards here in the Conservancy provide for defensible space, usually within 150 to 200 feet around structures, sometimes more. So there again, those are minimums, but Carol and Esther and I, we're out there and we're looking at this and we're thinking, we might need to go further here because of the topography, because of the fuels, because of all of that. Where's the prevailing wind going to come from when we get a fire? So sometimes it's going to be more, and that's why you need to look at the specific plan. So it is customized for specific property. It provides a 5-year Conservancy approval to work in the open lands. So if you have a fuel management plan, the details in there will give you permission to work in the open lands with those specific things that we list in the fuel management plan. So we heard a couple times this morning, determine defensible space needs from the structure out. What do you see in this structure? Try to start with the structure. What can you tell me about that structure? What do you see?
I can barely see it.
You can barely see it, that's right. So it's hard to see. Go ahead, Seth.
A lot of windows, they're pretty vulnerable.
Windows are vulnerable. So it's hard to tell. Anybody, can you tell the roof, what that roof might be made of?
Shape, shingle.
It is, it's a wood-shaped roof. It's on a slope, that's right. It's on a slope.
A lot of dead wood.
Yeah. A lot of dead wood. This is a chimney. One thing I do want to show here too, sometimes the pictures, when we're putting pictures in these fuels management plans, you can't always tell everything. That's why you look at the picture, you read the captions underneath, because there's branches maybe over that chimney, maybe that's far away, can't really tell. But this is wood siding, wood-shaped roof, heavy branches, heavy fuel on the ground. Does this look defensible? One of the things that's important to know is we do not have enough equipment, enough resources. There aren't enough fire engines in the country to have a fire engine at every house when we get a major fire. Insurance companies are now providing fire engines. So your insurance company may say, well, we have fire engines, but that shouldn't lead you into any complacency, because they don't have enough fire engines either. They're just trying to, help reduce their losses. But firefighters, trained firefighters, are not going to engage in fire suppression or defensible actions on this house because it's not defensible the way it is. Their safety is paramount. We can't expect them to go here and try to make a stand. And firefighters do go in and start, cutting branches, and they cut decks, and they do lots of things, but, that takes a lot of time. There's not always time. So we have a 5-foot non-combustible zone as part of the fuels management standards. So that is very important to structural ignition. The non-combustible zone is within 5 feet of the house, and this is where we want to limit our vegetation, increase our hardscape. I will tell you, we are not managing lawn furniture in these fuel management plans, but these cushions are susceptible to embers. So I just have to say that. You have a question?
Yeah, just looking at that upper picture of the left-hand corner, and this may not apply here, but I assume that's turf.
Turf?
Turf, right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah.
And there's a big swing about going to artificial turf. And now is artificial turf considered, it would be combustible, right?
I don't know about artificial turf.
So artificial turf is a petroleum product, and so it may not have loft embers like a leaf will, but you'll have a petroleum pool fire in your front door. So probably not a good. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
When you talk about increasing hardscape within that 5-foot defensible zone, are you finding that materials, plastic wood, I call it plastic wood, such as Trex or other materials like that, are better for fire suppression and creating defensible spaces, or is their chemical content problematic and toxic?
Again, chemical content of Trex.
Yeah.
Chemical.
Right. So Trex didn't fare well in the Tubbs fire. Trex did not fare well in the Tubbs fire. So most recently, that didn't work well up in the North Bay. It doesn't ignite as easily from embers, so its ignitability is not as good. I'm sorry, it isn't as ignitable as a wood deck. It doesn't have little nooks and crannies as it weathers, which is good. It's better than wood, but it's not fireproof. Old Trex may be made with a certain kind of resin and polyester or plastic that is more ignitable than others, and even as the production comes through, they don't know what kind of plastic they put in because it's recyclable plastic. So, short answer, it's better than wood, it's not fireproof.
Here's some examples of good non-combustible zones. Obviously, the hardscape, it looks gorgeous to me. The containerized plants are a really good choice with succulents. Carol's going to talk a little bit more about fire-resistant plants, but you can have plants in a non-combustible zone if they're fire-resistant plants. So we are going to get into that a little bit more later. But the hardscape's a good choice. These are, fire-resistant plants have a lot higher fuel moisture that Esther talked about. So the pliable succulents is a really good example. Without getting too technical, some of you are landscape people and you'll know a lot of them. The gravel is a really pretty choice, and we see good use of that. There's a water feature here. There's a water feature in here. Of course, you got this big old water feature there. So these are some good examples of what you want to see in a non-combustible zone. And they're attractive. Here's some of the issues we've seen in the non-combustible zone. So we see this a lot. We see this is a vent, a foundation vent for this house, and we've got leaves all around. And so those leaves are subject to those embers. When we talk about flying embers, those embers, they hit the house, they fall down to the ground, hit the leaves, catch the leaves on fire, get sucked into this vent, and start catching the house on fire. Esther.
One thing I want to point out about that is that if you see that's where the leaves gather, that's where the embers are going to gather. Because that's where the wind is blowing it. So just something to point out.
Excellent point, thank you. We also see these wood chips in the non-combustible zone, and you've got this cement siding here, non-combustible, but we have these combustible wood chips right under this decking. There's gravel on other parts of this property. In a lot of places they use gravel. So in this case, we recommended that they take out these wood chips and they replace it with gravel that that they're already using on other parts of their property. And that would solve that problem. This here, you've got a real woody, flammable plant. And you've got it, right here where embers would catch. I mean, in this corner, you got wood siding. It's wood under these eaves here. And so you've got this woody plant. And so what we're recommending here is take out that woody plant, replace it with a fire-resistant plant, and you still have a beautiful landscape, and you're just a little bit more fire safe. Here, we have woody plants right next to these windows, right again underneath a wooden roofing and wood siding. Here again, we can make better choices in the non-combustible zone with fire-resistant plants. The driveway zone, we talked about that a minute ago. Yes, question?
Just a quick question regarding the foundation vent.
Yes.
I learned about vents that are made so that embers can't go inside, and also vents that are painted with incandescent paint as well. Are those any good?
Yes, they are absolutely good, and in fact, that would be one of the first retrofit things for your house you want to make sure you have put in. The two brands are Brandguard and Vulcan vents. One is, as you mentioned, an incandescent paint that's coated, and so when something hot approaches it, the paint puffs up and has a char and blocks the vent. And the other one is actually better because it doesn't wait for any embers to come and land in it. It actually is baffled, so that the ember would have to go up and down and up and down, and it doesn't do that. So the baffling vent is the better one. I believe that's Vanguard and not Vulcan, but those are the two choices. And it's if you have any opportunity, retrofit your vents first thing.
Thanks, yeah. Still rake the leaves. Thanks, Esther. Carol's an expert on those foundation vents. Thanks for that question. That was a good one. And embers, as we heard earlier, embers can travel a mile up to a mile and a half in these large wildfires. So you got to be out ahead of it. The driveway zone is really critical. The residents need to be able to get out. During a wildfire, the firefighters need to be able to get in. If they're going to try to defend your house, they have to be able to get in there. And if they can't get in, they're going to keep going. So These overhanging branches, the requirement is to trim these up to 15 feet above the ground. So if this is 15 feet, you clear up to 15 feet, but you can keep this stuff up here that's over the driveway, so you don't have to take it up 30 feet or whatever that is. Here again, we're working with photos, and so we don't know exact distances here, but you get the idea. We want a fire engine to be able to get in there, and so we require 15 feet clearance. You know, same kind of thing here. So when we're looking at the driveway zones, we look at how much clearance do you need, and here comes that fuel, weather, and topography thing that Esther talked about, and the fire behavior. So some of them are going to require 15-foot clearance based on that fire behavior that we're looking at, and that we're verifying on the ground what we'd see. This top photo would be representative of something that would be about a 15-foot zone. The bottom one a 30-foot. Now both of these driveways need work. They don't need to be cleared, all the way or anything. But I mean, here's some branches that need to be trimmed down right here, within the 15 feet. The manzanita bush right next to the driveway, that's not really where we want the manzanita bush because, this is really a flammable plant, manzanita. And so we would get a lot of fire intensity out of that shrub right there, which could really affect people trying to evacuate if it's already on fire, or firefighters trying to get in. So we don't want a lot of fire intensity in this driveway zone, because we want safe ingress, egress, residents and firefighters. And along here, we have a lot of accumulation of leaves. We have really steady vegetation. There's a lot of dead in here. You can't necessarily see in this photo. This comes out as a lot higher fire behavior than this one does. We need some of these shrubs cleared out. We need the trees trimmed up. We need to manage these leaves. That's, over time. We're going to talk more about leaves, but go
Is
ahead.
that from the road all the way to the homeland?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's it, when you're looking at the sides of the driveway when they come in, I know that somebody does trimming, grass trimming, weed trimming,
Right.
things like that.
Yes.
What does that include?
What
So
is-
like if we had somebody come by there, do they have something that can knock back small shrubs, or is that something that we need to take care of ourselves and then have, with the, I'm not explaining myself.
I know what you're saying, I think, is what's the homeowner's responsibility, what's the conservancy responsibility?
Correct, yes.
That's what you're asking. Here we go.
I suspected she was going to hand that one to me.
Yeah.
So the Community Services District does the fuel management on the roads. And you will see, and that's subject to a roadside fuel management plan that we have. The driveway management is a responsibility of the owners, and it's subject to the lot-specific plan. And in many cases, those driveways are shared. And so it's very helpful to know, in many cases, a single driveway might go through 3 different residential properties before you actually get to the home. So we see great examples of homeowners working together, maybe hiring the same contractor to do the fuel management on the driveway. The good news is, aside from maybe some leaf blowing or some weed management in that zone, usually the heavy lift, which is the brush thinning and the tree limbing, that only needs to happen once every 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, depending on the kind of habitat. And so there's usually an initial hit, and the owners might work together on that, and then it drops into a maintenance level. And the fuel management plans are updated every 5 years, and we find that that's a really good interval, often just about 5 years in. Those oaks are maybe taking advantage of that open 15 feet, they're starting to drop in with new branches. You might have weeds really starting to come through, and woody weeds that really get established. And then it's time for the fuel management plan to come in and say, okay, we need to retrofit this, we need to do some more heavy work.
But what I'm asking is that if you do the roadside already, if I called up somebody, would they be able to do the driveway? Is what I'm saying.
Terrific question, and I will direct you to the resident services team who are here. who are a fantastic concierge service for all of this stuff. So Jen O'Hara is here in the back with her team. Julie Mendez is here. They are awesome at figuring out, if you tell them what you need, they'll figure out who to get. And sometimes it is the CSD, the Community Services District, does a fantastic job. Their team is here too. We love seeing them brought into the process because they're very competent and well-trained and terrific to work with. But if you need additional support in between their availabilities, we can help connect you with that.
Thank you.
Just got flashed.
Thanks for that question. As you can see, everything here is a partnership, between Carol's team and the Conservancy. We work really well together, hand in hand. We do these plans and they look at them, and we have back and forth conversations when we need to. So this is great. Oh, let's see, now we're on the landscape zone. Any other questions on that before we move off to defensible space? Okay, great.
We're going to spend some time about landscaping, because we know our audience has landscape architects, and it is, of course, an important part of it in keeping with your house out concept. So your landscape zone is, let me do that. Landscape zone is the area just outside the non-combustible zone, and you kind of control, it's a big part of controlling the destiny and the fate of that house occurs in the landscape zone. So we're going to spend some time on that. Sometimes when we go out to the preserve, the most fuel is right around the house. So you see the house, let me find out where the pointer is.
Top right.
Top right, yeah, okay. I'm not seeing it. It's not yet. Okay, good. All right, so hidden by all these bushes is the house on the left.
And can't get in there, so
okay, cool. So there isn't a whole lot of fuel in the grassland. Maybe that's a half ton per acre in the grassland. But there's probably 20 tons per acre in the manzanitas and the landscaping. So where's all the fuel? Right next to the house. So we're gonna, the fuel management plan will address that in an update and probably do a retrofit. But the point is that often the most fuel load is right around the house. And as Esther said, often the driest part of the whole property is the house. So we're going to work from the house out. So when you're doing designs, the design has to consider its eventual height and width of the plant as it grows. So it's really tempting to plant a whole bunch of plants so it looks really pretty right at the very beginning, but oftentimes they are not thinned out. Probably that was the intent during the design. And so from a fuel management plan perspective, that is actually a pretty nice spacing of your plants. And in fact, spacing is probably even more important than species selection. And that's because the spacing, if you have spaces between plants, it actually reduces the total volume that is available to burn. It also keeps the flames from burning from plant to plant to plant because air is actually a very good insulator. And then, of course, it gives every plant healthy because it has growing room. So when you're considering your planting, and we've seen an awful lot of privacy screening, and the screening often is good when it's planted, but sometimes the screening grows up above where it needs to be screened. So in this case, here's a tree that is blocking a building behind it, but when we do the pruning, and that's indicated by the yellow bars, now you can see the building behind it. So those pruning is required by the fuel management standards, but you lose your privacy, and that's because the tree is grown up tall. Actually, a good bush, if you planted above on the slope, would be a better choice for the screening. So consider how their screening plants will grow over time. And also the required treatments from the fuel management standards. So because we're going back and looking at updates of properties that have already been built, we often go back and say, oh, okay, now we have a whole lot of dead material in the landscaping because they've grown over time, and a refresh is appropriate. So the message here is consider plants that don't accumulate a whole lot of dead material in it. such as lavender or rosemary. So in this case, the homeowner actually did cut back the lavender and it's growing back. So it's a pretty harsh treatment, but it's going to grow back pretty well. The harder thing is actually what we would call retrofitting, and this is especially important in the non-combustible zone. It's a new part of the standard. So now the original designs included a whole lot of plants that are in the non-combustible zone. So they have to be changed so that it can be in compliance with the standards. It's not easy, but it can be done. So in this case, the homeowner actually removed a whole lot of shrubs. Sorry, it's awfully dark. But they have made them very, very short. And in the other case of the bush on the right, or I think it's a crepe myrtle, they took all the material out from down by the ground and then left the material up on the top. And that is actually a workaround for a non-compliant zone, so that the embers on the ground will meet bare ground. Okay, this way? Okay, thank you. All right, is this better? Yes. Oh yeah, I'll go right here. So to start your retrofit strategy, you go ahead and then pick out the plants you want to keep and then prune those. So it's you start with, and here's some really good examples. These were total masses of complete, with no spaces in between. On the bottom left, the homeowner selected the grass and then kind of pulled back the ground cover, which had a whole lot of dead material in it, and it's really very dense too. So that was a good example of how they minimized the space, minimized the width of the ground cover, and created spaces both between the grasses and between the grass and the ground cover. On the upper right, that was actually a whole straight hedge of manzanita, and they not only created gaps between the different bushes, they also pruned the manzanitas and got rid of all the dead material, and probably 3/4 of the fuel volume within the manzanita. And then in the bottom right, they had manzanitas, and they chose to treat it a different way by creating individual clumps. Instead of a linear feature, they wanted some privacy, and they created clumps and maintained it that way. So these are some good examples and some design ideas for how to retrofit. So you guys got a handout. How many of you got the 11 by 17 handout? And it's about what makes a plant fire-friendly or fire-foe. And, or vice versa, what makes it friendly or a foe compared with fire safety. So we're going to go through this really quickly. And let me see. So you probably come across a fire-resistant plant list. There are a jillion fire-resistant plant lists, and some of them even conflict with each other. So I'm giving you criteria so that you can choose your own plants based on these criteria, and this is how the plant lists have been developed anyway. So the first on the plant list is actually what is the mature size of it, how big it is. And we're trying to get at what is the volume of the plant. And sometimes this overall size of the plant belies how much volume is available to burn. A lot of plants are wispy. If you cut for example, the rhytes, if you cut it all up and put it in a paper bag, you could probably put it all in a grocery bag. But if you put in on the bottom side, the bad bush, chemise, you're going to probably need 2 grocery bags or more. So the point is that how much is the total volume of that bush, considering the size of the plant too. So we really want to find out what is available to burn, the total volume. And then the other question is, how dense is it? We want a lot of space between the branches in the plant. Again, chemise is a bad actor. It's very dense. And rhytes might be a really good, a good counterpoint to that. And a big point of fire resistance is how big are the leaves. Juniper has very tiny little leaves. It is a horribly flammable plant. And so that's another bad thing. You want plants that have big leaves. And it's a matter of surface area because little pieces ignite easier than big pieces. And then, as Esther pointed out, high moisture is a really important aspect of it. And it's not just succulents. Some plants can be high in moisture without being fleshy. And also, you don't need to have a lot of irrigation. Some plants are just normally high in moisture. Keep in mind, too, some native plants will lose their moisture content over the season regardless of how much irrigation you put in. Our native chaparral plants have really low fuel moistures regardless of how much irrigation you put in. And that's... All right, so I'll reemphasize this. Of anything that is categorized as sticky, pitchy, smelly, oily, you don't want it. Because the oils have 3 times the BTU content in any kind of cellulose. So anything that has those descriptors are bad. And then there are a lot of plants that have dead material in it when they're overshaded. This juniper bush on the top is probably 2/3 is dead material. And one comment about that, if you take away the dead material, you're actually increasing the moisture content of the whole complex. Because anything that is dead is 10 times drier than anything that's live. So without adding a drop of water, by taking away the dead material, you're increasing the moisture content of what might be available to burn. Right, and then I've already talked about tiny leaves, but the last point is some plants actually lose their leaves very easily during a dry wind. Actually, a classic example of that is poison oak. It is so sensitive to moisture in the air, it loses its leaves. It's drought deciduous. I'm not suggesting you plant any poison oak, but that's a good example of that concept. Okay, questions? Yes?
I have a question about backers. It's growing out here beautifully everywhere. Green all year, doesn't need water. You know, we have water requirements, water use requirements too, right? And I see it on all the lists of fire resistant when it is planted correctly, which is at least 8 foot apart, so it doesn't build up on top of each other and then get the dead. You know, if you plant them far apart, especially the super low ones, they're, I think, very highly rated for fire resistance. So I see them here on the phone list.
Yeah.
And they are native. They're like, they've got all the pluses going for them. And I'm just
So here's a question about backers. And it's as she points out, it's so common in here, and it's on many fire-resistant plant lists. And the reason why it's on a faux list is, and I did my master's thesis on Baccharis, and of course was bred, so I'm intimate with Baccharis. It really grows a lot of dead material over time. And so when it's fresh and new as a landscape plant, it looks great. And if you, especially the upright form, if you kept it if you managed it every 5 years, it could be fire resistant. But the prostrate brand often is not well maintained. They plant it, and then we've seen it grow, and the dead material, because it has this facade of greenery over the top, isn't seen. So it's often 50% dead material in the prostate cut. And so many of the highway used to be planted by Caltrans and medians, and places in the Central Valley have said, no, you can't do that anymore because an ember would land on it and it would burn with such intensity that they'd have a hard time having the firefighting trucks go by. Yes?
Can you talk to us a little bit about ornamental grasses? You've been talking about woody plants, specifically around in the 5-foot zone and adjacent to the building. Can you tell us a little bit more about something that doesn't have a lot of fuel load and might burn quickly, whether that's a good or bad thing? I saw that the Lanus was on here.
Right. So I like Lanus triticores because it doesn't ever really cure. It's green all year long, and so it goes back into that 10 times wetter than anything that's dry. And so grass that doesn't cure at all is preferred. And in fact can be a heat sponge for that. Grasses don't have a whole lot of oomph behind it. When you want to build a fire, you don't use grass as kindling, you use pine needles. And grass, if you start a fire in it, it burns so quickly, it isn't as bad as even bigger leaves. But it is, because it burns so quickly and is ignited so easily, that is the problem with dry grasses. But if it's green, it's okay. Yeah.
Another question, this one about mulch. So the no mulch within 30 feet of the house thing, I feel like you're killing me because it's, in terms of weed suppression, mulch is very, very important, and weeds grow up fast, and they are dry, and they are fuel, and the mulch keeps them down. It's also putting gravel out in those areas, which you can do in a small area, but a really large area of gravel is a real maintenance burden for the homeowner.
So,
but actually, I'm sorry. And there's a kind of ruling requirement here in that if you're not in the preserve and you're just working in a house in the county, there's a requirement to put 3 inches of mulch down. It's in the NWELO, I forget what the thing is. All right, and you got to check that box. It says you have required as a landscape architect and sign your name that there's 3 inches of mulch under all the planting. So these 2 requirements are just butting heads, which basically means you can't plant anything within 30 feet of the house if you are, really kind of boxes for all these things. So, yeah.
So the picture on the right is a non-combustible zone with green grasses and succulents. So that is a workaround. And it was removed with all of the mulch was taken away. And I agree with you regarding the competing and conflicting, because non-combustible zone is actually an ordinance, a state law now. And so it is a requirement, not just a good idea. So it's a statewide thing too.
Yeah, to keep that grass green, we've got to use a tremendous amount of water, which we do not have, and we are not allowed to use. So I'm just kind of
and the question is having, sorry? Okay, yeah, so the question is regarding the conflicting between water use, mulch, and the non-combustible zone. And so she's mentioning that there is a county requirement for 3 inches of mulch for planting outside the preserve, and how that is in basic conflict with this non-combustible zone, and that gravel is a very tough thing to maintain. And that regarding the gravel, it does also make me prompt the folks to consider maintenance in their plans, because if you're gonna have to rake it, some designs are easier to rake than others. This design would be horrible to rake. You'd have to do something else with it. Did I answer? Okay, one more question.
Yeah, I got 2 questions. One, other than gravel, we've sometimes used as an amendment this fir humus, and I'm wondering, we have used it as a mulch also. I wonder if that has the same fire content, fuelness as regular mulch. And then my other question was, not exactly what we're talking about right now, but if we have a client that either just bought a house or has had a house that didn't just get redone, when they purchase the house, are they usually given the fuel management, or is that something that they need to reach out, or us as the landscaper could reach out to you guys to get where they could get that? If the homeowner should have it, or if we need to go elsewhere?
2 questions. Remind me of the first one.
The first one was about the fir humus.
Okay, good. So the University of Nevada, Reno did a really good comparison of different mulches, and so I suggest that they said that pine needles were really bad, fir was less bad, and basically the chunkier, bigger pieces are better than the very fine pieces. Going back to smaller is worse than bigger. But none of those are acceptable in a non-combustible zone on the preserve. The second question is, if a homeowner purchases a property, are they given a fuel management plan? It depends on if the previous owner provided it to them, is my understanding.
So we could go to you guys to get
Either
that?
the Conservancy or Resident Services.
We share a database, so they should all be consistent regardless of whether you go to the preserve or the conservancy to get that. Question in the back?
What about like fire resistant mulch, like redwood bark or something?
That doesn't cut it. And we're trying to also understand and respond to the insurance needs that Forest has presented to us. So in a non-combustible zone would be no woody material. Yes?
Carol, the non-combustible zone seems to be the most restrictive, and there's even seems to be some inconsistencies on what that distance is, because Kathy mentioned 5 feet, and I think I saw a diagram earlier that showed 30 feet. Does that vary depending on the site and the plan, or is that a state mandated speed?
So the standards say 5 feet from the edge of the house for absolutely no mulch and no woody material, and that's how we define non-combustible. The 4291 says you will have no combustible material within 30 feet. Well, what they mean is no dead material, no wood, nothing down on the ground. So it's a matter of definition. Any questions? Okay, great.
Just to clarify that too, that 30 feet is not a non-combustible zone. It's a defensible space zone. So there is a difference. 5 feet is part of that 30 feet, or 100 feet. You can still have vegetation, but it's not a non-combustible zone.
Yeah, but the language they use is don't have any combustible material, which is really confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe we have a break scheduled, a 10-minute breaks, and so we're hoping that you'll be back at 10:35. All right, thank you.